Hi, my name's Hayden Lee, and I chose to do my movie relationship analysis on a movie called Orange County. Orange County takes place in Orange County, California, and this movie is a comedy. Although it has some dark storylines, it really has a very humorous side on it. To start out this movie, the main character Sean Brumder is writing a letter and narrating this letter that he's writing to his favorite author named Marcus Skinner. He's explaining that throughout high school, he was, at the beginning of high school at least, he was just a surfer kid with his friends. All he liked to do was surf. He lived a very relaxed life. And although he got good grades because he was very smart, he just lacked some focus with school. And it all was kind of relaxed until he and his friends went to chase down a tropical storm to go surf on, when his best friend Lonnie actually passes away. So when Lonnie dies, this kind of sparks a change in Sean, and Sean starts to kind of soul search, you could say. And one day, while he is thinking about his life, where he wants to go on the beach, he comes across a book written by Marcus Skinner. He reads this book over and over and over again, and he comes to love it. And by reading this book, he decides that he wants to become a writer. So that's what he's explaining to Marcus Skinner. He actually sends him a copy of his book that kind of explains a story about his life, about his relationships with his family and friends. And so at this point, he decides that he wants to go to Stanford because Marcus Skinner is a professor at Stanford. He wants to go study with him and become a writer by going to Stanford. So he applies to Stanford, and he finds out that he doesn't get in. And he doesn't get in because the counselor at his school actually mixes up his transcripts with another student who wouldn't have gotten into Stanford. He's very upset about this, and so he's going through his head trying to figure out ways that he can get in. So for the first thing he does is he visits his father, and this is kind of the first peek you get into his relationships. He visits his father, who is a very wealthy man who had abandoned his family when Sean was young, so Sean really doesn't have a big relationship with him, but he's very wealthy, so he thinks out of love his dad will donate to Stanford and he'll be able to get in. After his dad, in being his selfish self, doesn't want to donate because he wants Sean to take on the family business, Sean storms out angry at his father. So that's one way that he can't get into Stanford. The next thing that he tries is he uses his girlfriend, who is a very selfless person, who just kind of lacks communication. His girlfriend actually doesn't really want him to go to Stanford because she's worried that they're not going to be able to stay together if he goes all the way to Stanford. She just doesn't really communicate these issues with him very much, but she helps him set up a meeting with a board member at Stanford through one of her friends, and hopefully this is a way that Sean can get into Stanford. So he has the meeting, and this is where you really get to meet Sean's family. I'll be doing an analysis through this summary of the movie, an analysis of some of the characters. So this is kind of where you get to meet his mom, is at this meeting with the board member. So you find out that his mom is kind of a drunk, that she's kind of dependent on Sean, that she's kind of psycho, that she's a crazy mom. And she's kind of an embarrassment to Sean. You also meet his brother Lance, who is an enormous embarrassment to Sean when he's trying to get into Stanford. You find out that Lance is kind of a drug addict, that he's kind of just a washed out dude. And so when they set up this board meeting, Sean just kind of begs his family to be normal as they can. He tells Lance to stay in his room. He tells his mom to keep it together. But like his family usually does, they kind of broke down. His mom has a drunk broke down in front of the board member, and then Lance comes out and embarrasses him while he's intoxicated. And so these board members say that Sean should never get into Stanford. So that's another way that Sean can't get in. So he resorts to a final thing, and he asks Lance to take him up to Stanford to speak with the dean of admissions to explain this mix-up. So this is kind of a thing that shows a little bit of Lance's true character, that he loves Sean, that he shows compassion towards him and wants to help him out. So they go up to Stanford and go to the office of admissions, and they find that the dean isn't there anymore. He had already gone home. So Lance stays there while Sean and his girlfriend Ashley go to the house of the dean. While Lance is still at the office, he's trying to sweet talk the workers there to get Sean in, and actually ends up burning down the building because he just kind of ruins everything that that is a chance for Sean to get in. And then as Sean is at the house of the dean, the dean accidentally becomes intoxicated through some pills that Lance had in his bag. So they didn't mean to do it, but the dean becomes intoxicated, and somehow Sean convinces him to go to the office and put him on the rolls to get him into Stanford right there. So they go and they drive with the dean to the office, and they find that it's burned down and that Lance is speaking to the fire department. So there's another way that there's no way that Sean's getting in. That's kind of the last straw, and he has a breakdown. He yells at Lance, he yells at Ashley, and those relationships are just like, it seems like they're just crashing to the ground. So Ashley takes off very hurt, and Sean decides to go take a walk on Stanford's campus. And as he's walking on Stanford's campus, he actually sees Marcus Skinner, and he starts to speak to him, and he finds that Marcus Skinner actually read his letter and the book that he sent him, the story that he sent him. Marcus Skinner liked it, and he tells him he's a good writer, and kind of convinces Sean that he doesn't really need to go to Stanford, that he can stay at home, and because his family really is his inspiration for his writing. So this is kind of a turning point for Sean, where he kind of sets aside his own selfish desires and realizes how dependent his family is on him and how much they mean to him and how much he means to them. So this is kind of where the repair of the relationships comes. This is kind of the upside to Sean here. So we can start with Ashley, and so I'll analyze a little bit about how they were in the story and prescribe some corrections, things that they could have done in the first place to avoid some potentially uncomfortable situations. So Ashley, like I said, didn't really communicate well. From the beginning, she could have communicated that her worries about him going to Stanford. He could have communicated back that they could have been okay, or he could have decided to stay anyway. So that's kind of something that they could have done from the first place, and they wouldn't have gotten in this fight. But in the end, Sean does make it up to her. He apologizes sincerely, and luckily she's patient with him, and she's very forgiving, which is something that we have read in this class is a very important part of relationships, is having patience with people and being forgiving, and the communication is also key in that. Next, with Lance, he kind of heals that relationship. He realizes that Lance isn't a completely normal person, but he's understanding of that, and he shows compassion towards him and understands that Lance depends on Sean for a lot of things. So that's kind of how they mend their relationship. But from the beginning, I think Sean really could have just been more patient with him, shown more affection towards Lance, and kind of had a sense of humor towards what his brother does. And that kind of could have helped the relationship a little bit more from the very beginning. Those are things that we have read, and things that were in the survey that we read from the very beginning of the semester. Now on to his father. First of all, he could have had better communication with his father too. If he didn't cut ties completely with him, he could have maybe had a better relationship and been able to have the donation go through. So kind of compassion for his father would have helped a lot. But in the end, his father comes around and wants to help him get into Stanford, but Sean decides to stay with his family anyway. And then we can move on to his mother, which is, I think, the most dysfunctional relationship in the entire movie. That she is a drunk, that she's really taken care of by Sean, not the other way around, which is interesting. So for that reason, Sean kind of goes into it not having very much respect for her and kind of being resentful that she doesn't want him to go to Stanford. And eventually she comes around and wants him to go after he has already decided that he wants to stay and be with them. So my advice to Sean on that relationship is to have more compassion towards his mother, to understand that her life wasn't easy, and to just kind of be patient, take care of her, and accept who she is and how much that she really loves him. So these are all very, very dysfunctional relationships, I understand, and that's part of the humor of the movie. But it's really something. It's a movie that you can see how relationships can be better formed and how somebody can come around and fix things and what really does make a healthy relationship.